Welcome everyone. My name's Tiffany. I'm the Tipsy Artist, and today we're going to be doing an online class with this beautiful painting. This is our beautiful Boho horse. So this is one from a live class that I do in studio, and then today we're going to be doing it with one of my painting kits. So I'll guide you through it step by step and show you everything from tracing to the finished product. So we're going to have a lot of fun. So enjoy yourselves. And if you need any of the supplies to join me, you can just go to our website at tipsyartist.com, and that's where you can find all the supplies that correspond with this beautiful painting so that you can paint along with me. With the traceable as well. So I am going to be switching camera views now to a closer look so that you can see that much better than what you would be seeing if I were doing it from a distance way back there. So we're going to switch here. Let me get my camera over here. Awesome. Okay. Then I'm going to put my lovely model painting in front of me. Okay. All right. So again, all of your supplies come to you in the mail, and like this will be inside. There's going to be the canvas. Again, everything you need. The only thing you're going to have to get um, will be your water. But other than that, everything comes with your kit ready to go. And then I have worked ahead a little bit on the transfer work. I do have a separate video that talks about how to do that process, but I'll go over it briefly here. So your kit does contain a pencil and the transfer paper, again, canvas, and the line art. So the first thing it will do is I will tape down the transfer paper just centered in the middle. Up here at the top, I do want to keep my transfer paper free and loose so that I can check my work and make sure that I have all the details in place before I lift this off. That's really important because once you lift it off, it's virtually impossible to line it back up again. So you want to be able to check your work. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just start to, just like we say, just trace. So you're just going to be doing a hard press of a line over that line. And then the cool thing about graphite is that it does have a little bit of a shimmer to it. And so you'll be able to, you can like hold it up in the light a little bit to see that shimmer so that you know where you've been with the lines. But then, of course, you can also lift up and check your work here too to make sure that you've got all your lines in place. Okay, so again, like I mentioned, I have worked ahead. Oh, one other thing, this is important. You want to make sure that the dull side faces up and the shiny side faces the canvas. So that's really important because this is the part that will make the transfer onto the canvas. All right, awesome. Okay, so initially this will look like pencil work. It's going to look just like a graphite line on your canvas. It'll be kind of light. Your kit also contains a permanent marker. I personally love the use of the permanent marker. I like to go in and do a hard line on everything. It just really, it's much better to me for beginners. That way, when you're pushing the paint on the surface, it either creates a nice little shadow underneath, but it also maintains your trace. You don't lose your trace on accident. So you did all this hard work. And as a beginner, sometimes with our paint, we can obscure the pencil line and then you're lost and you don't know how to get back to that point to find the shape. So this makes sure that you still have your lines all in place. So I love this. And I even like how it looks under a lot of the work. Some of my paintings, I may not always want that hard line under things, but I always tell you that in advance, like which elements to keep soft and then which ones to do hard line. But in this one, I'm going to go ahead and just do all of it with a hard line. So once I'm done with that, I'll push this over to the side. So we're done with all that now. And then I'm going to go ahead and just do a little flip and position that underneath, or you can actually just lift off with your tape if you want. All right. So we've got our paint nearby. This is our paint kit. I've gone ahead and unboxed it. And the good news is very long lasting. You'll have more than one use for this. So like today, I'm going to be able to use my paint more than one time. And so that's good. And then I've got my brushes here nearby. I've got my mama brush and my little buddy brush and my little bit brush. So that's my cute little family of brushes. And then you've got your napkin. You have a couple of plates here that you'll use for your paint, work as your palette. All right, and I've got a little bit of a start here with some titanium white to begin with. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do, oh, and you'll have this visual too. So very helpful. So we have a great start. So to begin with, I'm going to go ahead and start with my mama brush. And your brush will be brand new, so it'll be a little bit stiff. So I'm going to go ahead and push it into the water, give mama a little swim here, and then I'll just kind of dab that dry. Do a little bit of a press, get the extra water out of the brush. And then we want to go ahead and work on our background first. So again, I've got my titanium white. Let me go ahead and pick this up here. All right, so here's our titanium white. And again, as I mentioned, I've already used this in a previous class, so a little bit extra. And then we're also going to use the primary cyan blue. So I'm going to do just a little pea-size amount of that. All right, lovely. And then we're going to do just a little touch of the corner of the brush into that primary cyan blue. And we're going to mix that with our titanium white. And so this gives me a really pretty light blue color. So that is lovely. And there's a couple of different directions that you can go with this. If you want more of a cool color, like a slate, then you can add a little bit of the Mars Black. This is a good example of what it looks like brand new. So you'll have to lift off that foil. And you always want to recap your paint because this will last for a really long time, but recapping is essential. Okay, so that keeps that airtight. Now the first shade I'll show you is a little bit more of that slate color. So you can just do a teeny tiny little touch of that. A little bit of black goes a very long way, so you can push that in. And there's that really pretty slate color. Okay, so that's really pretty. And push that on to give you a visual of that. The other color that you might like if you want something a bit more vibrant would be a turquoise color. So we're going to use a little bit of our Viridian. I'll do a little touch of that, a little pea-size amount there. Do a little touch. Start to work that into that blue and the white, and then that pushes that to a beautiful turquoise color. So you can see they're very different, a little bit more vibrant, a little more of a dark, stormy sky, like maybe a little storms coming. So like a nice rain, maybe. You can do a little bit of both. All right. Now the brush stroke on this is going to be where it feels like you make the letter X over and over again. Kind of crisscross that back and forth. I'm going to take off this paper. Okay. And as I'm working this in, I'm going to go ahead and take that same brush. I'm going to push into that little corner of the white and just push this back and forth. So I'll be alternating back and forth, a little bit of white mixed in with that beautiful slate blue or more of that turquoise. So that's quite lovely. And the other thing you can do too to help extend the paint just a little bit is you can add a teeny amount of water to this too. And that really helps that paint flow into the pores of the canvas in case you start to run into a little bit of that dry brush look. So again, a little teeny amount of water can really help with that. And you can pick up a little bit more paint over here. So as you're working into the larger sections of the back of the canvas, you can use a pretty broad stroke. And again, there's a lot of freedom in this and just crisscrossing the brush back and forth. Now we're getting into cut-in work really quickly. So you're going to have to switch over to a smaller brush to be a lot more careful. And as I mentioned, this will bleed through. So another option is to not cut in and be a little bit loose with it. And then look at that, it's going to bleed through there. And then that way use a little bit of water and just kind of crisscross that back and forth. And then that's one way to go ahead and work in that color all the way around without having to be too careful. Now, if that drives you nuts and you're like, no, too type A for that, let me go ahead and put mom in the water, let her rest a little bit. You can take your little bit brush, let's do a little push into the water, a little swim, do a little twirl here, get that extra water off of the brush. And then we'll do a little twirl. There's that little twirl into the paint. Now you can just hold it just like you'd hold a pencil, and you can just work that around those more small curvy shapes. But that's a way to have a little bit more precision and do a tight cut in around the shapes that you traced. And so that's another way. And then once you've got that precise line around that shape, then you can come back in with your bigger brush, your mama brush, and you can start to feather out those brush strokes again. I'm going to rinse out completely here, dry off, go back to my mama brush, and do a little pat here. Grab a little bit more of that white and the blue. We're going to get a bigger mix of this paint. A little touch of that turquoise, grab a little bit of water. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of crisscross back and forth. I'm going to be careful around the eye so I don't lose that shape. And especially around the plants and the flower and the floral and the flowers, I actually prefer to do a little bit of this over painting so that there's no negative space that's peeking through and I get really nice full coverage behind every flower and every leaf. And of course, it also has a much more beautiful feathery stroke to go ahead and cover the canvas. Holding it up to the light where I can see if I've got good coverage here. And so I'll do a loose sweep around the edge. And then this is all going to become horsehair here. Now let me show you something else fun that you can do. If you want something a bit more dramatic in the sky with darker blues, you can actually push into that pure blue and you can do some of that blending, see, right on the canvas and just crisscross it out, feather those strokes back and forth, lots of repetition, and that'll give you a nice soft blend into those other shades. Add a little bit of water to feather out those strokes and create some soft transitions. You can see how it really blended in nicely, but it did offer some darker shades in there. You can also do that with a little bit of that Viridian too. Apply a little bit more of like a firm pressure to work that in. Also, a little bit of water can help dilute that too. A little bit more white. And I'll do kind of a soft crisscross over the top of this mane. You definitely want to cut in a little bit into the mane, because as you pull the mane out in front of the sky, you don't want some just negative white space kind of peeking through. So I'm going to go ahead and do this lovely sky color, full coverage, kind of over the top of where that mane's going to go. And there it is, bleeding through beautifully, which we love. And just crisscross back and forth. And then I'll hold the brush more like a pencil with that line edge facing the canvas. And I'll do a nice little cut in around that face, the mouth. Do a little cut in here. All right, that is really lovely. Nice background all the way around. And of course, you can add a little bit more. If you want to lighten it up a little bit, you can add more white. You can make it a little bit more textural, kind of rest right over the top. And a more gentle hand allows you to do that. So just kind of barely touch the canvas and again, crisscross back and forth. Lots of repetition, just keep sweeping it back and forth. And you can see how that kind of pulls in those lighter touches. It's like a little bit of atmospheric sky in the background or a little bit of cloud cover. That's really pretty. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and rinse out now. Dry off. And then we're going to get a nice little mix of some of those golden tones that will cover the horse. That's going to be our next step. So I'm going to use this gorgeous cadmium yellow. And we're brand new again. So again, it's got that little foil lift there. Nice. These are really secure in here today. All right, we'll do a little pea size amount. And then we're going to grab some primary yellow. A pea size amount. And let's grab some orange, cadmium orange. I'll teach you how to make some brown, and then we'll also mix white with a lot of these warm golden tones. So there's our cadmium orange. I'm going to do another dollop to keep some of that orange pure, and then we'll make some brown with some of it as well. So let's take our mama brush again, and let's mix up some brown. Oh, I need some black. Do I have black? Yes. Okay. So there's a little bit of that Mars black that I already have on my plate. And we're going to just do a little touch of that. We're going to start to work that into that cadmium orange. And so black, Mars black, and cadmium orange make brown. There it is. All good to go. So we've got a lot of brown to work with now. Nice medium shade. And then you can add a little bit of white to this too, and that'll help lighten up that brown. So that's very pretty. All right. Love it. Okay. So I'm going to take, this is still using our mama brush, and I'm going to go ahead and do a little sweep here around that sweet cheeks. Okay. Follows that little line. And just kind of do a little sweep back and forth. It's almost going to feel like a little sweeping parentheses. And then I'm going to grab some of that pure orange, work that in. Let's grab a little bit of white in there too to make it a little bit peachy. And push that in. And you can also hold the brush a little more over to the side with more of a gentle hand to allow a lot more of that paint just gently rest on the surface. Push in a few little shadows here. And kind of follow the hair a little bit. And I'm going to use a darker brown here to kind of make a little bit of a tiny little shadow right at the end of that cheek. A little bit of white, kind of softly feather that out. Do quick little pushes in here. And then grab a little bit more of that darker brown. And a little bit more of the black to help make it really dark. And we're going to come underneath that cheek there, grab a little more black. Grab that black, create a little shadow underneath. Soft curve. I do a little V pull here. Do a few little shadows underneath those flowers. Quick pulls here. I'm gonna squeegee off that paint, save it, kind of push that into the water a little bit. I grab little buddy. And then I'm going to start to work in some lighter shades. So I'm going to grab some white and that primary yellow, a little bit of that cadmium yellow, and some more white. Just kind of pushing all those in. And then we're going to start to softly blend this. Grab a little bit of brown in there too to help pre-blend a little bit. And start to just kind of softly blend this in. We're going to do like soft little curves. It's almost going to feel like those little parentheses strokes. And create that look of like fur. Follow the curves. Grab a little bit of white to make like little highlights. And when you get to the end of the hair, you can also just kind of, you taper it out and then lift off with the light hand. And then we have a lot more of a strong concentration of the white in through here in the center. I'm going to grab a lot more of that white. I'm going to pull that through top of the nose. Pull that down into that shape that we traced. Grab a little more of that cadmium yellow, and then we're going to transition and softly blend those two colors together. Pick up a little bit of orange too. And also note too that you can be creative with this, and if you're going to match your horse at home, if you have a horse, you can certainly make it more brown or black or white. You can adjust this too if you want. Do a little touch of orange in here. Yeah, mine might be a little bit different every time. A little color in there, a little bit of yellow. Kind of pick up little random pieces. Do little pushes of color on there. Got a little touch of that brightness there. I'm going to come back in with a bit more of that brown underneath. Carefully wrap that around the eye. And you can also use the little bit brush for that too, if that gives you a bit more confidence to work in and around these shapes. So like up above here, I'm going to use my little bit brush and I'll do a soft curve. Again, that kind of feels like that big parenthesis stroke just over and above the eye. And softly blend that in. And hold the brush a little bit more over to the side and do soft little pulls. Grab a little bit more of that brown. Kind of hold the brush a little bit more over to the side. Soft little touches over the side. So as I hold the brush a little bit more over the side, it allows a little bit more of that paint just rest right on the surface area. Gives you a more gentle hand. Come in with a light hand. Fine detail here with the cut-in work. And our little bit brush. Grab a little bit more of that black. Make a darker brown in here. I'm going to grab just little pushes of that shadow that come out from the ear here. So firm pressure and then pull out and then lift off. And then as you reach the end of the hair, you want to lift off with a light hand. You can come back in a little bit more of that yellow. Work back in those highlights. Even that white is really pretty. The thick little accent right over the top. And come in, do real and sweeps of that thicker white. Pull that in over the top. Let this little buddy actually rest in there. To come back in with the darker brown. I'm going to come around this little ear here. Any place that I have a little shadow and I want to be just, I kind of work back in that black a little bit too, just to make sure I don't lose that shape. Work that in. And even if I come back in and make a highlight over the top, I like to reinforce that shadow to begin with. It's that fun little ear. Let's do another side on this one. And just kind of pull up and then lift off with a light hand. And then see, there's that point, lift off with a light hand there. Rinse out. We're going to pick up a little more of that yellow and the white. And we're going to do a little highlight here, just kind of barely touch. Pull that in while that paint's still wet. And then another one here, a little highlight. Go back in a little bit dark. A little shadow in here. And we have a little bit of a shadow happening in the hair, so I'm going to do a little pull and drag that through. All right, we're starting to get some blue-gray happening here too, underneath in the nose area. So I need to blend up some of that again. So I've got this initial blend from the sky, which is helpful. I'm going to do some more of that blue, a little bit of that black. So a darker slate color. So we have shades now, more blue and then darker slate and then light, more light. Still pretty dark, but adding a little bit more white for those different levels. And I'm going to just kind of do a little presses here on the side of the brush. I'm going to work this gently around that little nostril area there. And just to kind of light little pulls up. Light little pulls up and a little bit of taper. Same thing here. Now you're going to be really careful with your little bit brush and just come around that black because you don't want to obscure that black. That's the shape of that nostril in there. And that's a nice little detail. You keep that in place and you're going to keep that nose looking the way it should. And then we're going to go ahead and fill into that little bit of line work that we did. Carefully go around that nostril area there. And fill that in. And a little bit of water here. Kind of helps soften it. And you can just do little pulls up. And then I want to grab a little bit more black and I'm going to darken in here because I definitely don't want to lose that mouth either. And I want to make sure that that is distinctly shadowed in underneath. Curve in that black. We start with our shadows first. And then over the nose here, I can work in a little bit of that pure black over the top. A little bit of water, do a little bit of that twirl again into the paint to get a nice fine taper. With the brush, it gives you a lot more precision and control. Just following along here. Soft curve. Reinforce this side. And then I'm going to take just a little bit white, a little bit more white here. A little bit of that brown and white. And I'm just going to softly paint back into the edge of that gray. Just kind of softens that transition a little bit. You kind of work back and forth. Where it's wet paint with wet paint. To where it's not just a hard line and they softly blend in together. You can add a few more little shadows now if you want. Make that darker charcoal gray kind of come in and do a few little touches of shadow. Probably just a little more of that black, working that in. So little touches, reshadowing a little bit. Oh, it's looking really pretty. Okay, now I've got, this is more hair here. So we're going to come in with our cadmium yellow and our primary yellow, a little bit of that white, and a teeny touch of the brown. And we're going to work that in this little section. We still have this nice shadow, so that's wonderful because that helps define that curve of the face. And a little bit of white in here too to kind of help create that fur texture. Softly pull that down. And because this has set up and dried, you're getting a nice big line there. So we need to soften that back up a little bit. So I'm going to come back in a little more of that orange. Go right back in over the top. Doing that next transition of blending. And then we're going to grab more black and that brown. And remember, the brown is the mix of the orange and the black. So now we're going to softly do that wet brown again over the top and see how it's creating that softer transition now. We're going to do an overpaint now. Starting to see the softness happen between the two. So it's not just a real stark line there. Yeah, it's looking nice. Yeah. And we'll bring in that mane over the top to make this look more natural. Right now, I just wanted to have the freedom to do that stroke and that blending. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse out real quick. Letting this set up and dry around the eye too. I'll come back in and work in those details, but I'm going to go back to my mama brush. Get that, squeegee that extra water out of there. And we'll come in with some of our cadmium yellow and primary yellow, a little bit of white. Excuse me. Okay, now we're going to do some of those pulls here and start to make some more brown. Black, orange. Pull this in around that flower. And soft pulls. I'm going to grab a little bit more black. Just make sure I get plenty of that in case I need to blend it more brown. Soft curves. Pushing around that flower. Oh, now I can start to really lighten up. I can grab a lot more of the white and our primary yellow and our cadmium yellow. Now that I've got this shadow work done, then I can start to pull into that and do those soft curves that come down. Those are looking gorgeous. So you can hold the brush just like you hold a pencil, go into that brown, soft curves. And when you get to the edge, then you just want to lift off with a light hand. And you can work back and forth with your darks and lights a little bit. So we're working in the light colors. Now I can also do some of my pink in there, which is really pretty. So I'm going to grab some primary magenta. Do a little touch of that. Start to work that in. See, that softly blends with that yellow and the white, and it just lightens it right up too. Nice little fun pink right there on the canvas. And you can make a really light paint by pre-blending that too. Just do more of a flat brush look to get more texture over the front. And again, primary magenta, a little bit more of that white. Just holding the brush a little bit more over to the flat side. And just quick little sweeps. And that allows a lot more of that paint to just kind of rest right on the surface. Of course, I'm a really big fan of the pink, so I'm kind of heavy-handed with that, but you can be a little bit lighter and bring in more. You may be more of a fan of like the cadmium yellow or white or orange. I mean, you can just kind of, or brown, you're a little more. I do little quick drags, have that kind of trail off into the sky. Okay. All right, now we're going to start working on our flowers. So we have a lot of fun little pink flowers up here. And you can use your little buddy brush too for this, or mama. Grab little buddy. I'm going to grab some of that primary magenta and the white. And I'm going to do just little soft curves. So it kind of feels like you make like little parentheses or half circles. Grab a little bit of white as we go and sweep that white into that pink. And just half circles. Push that around the pattern of that flower. So again, you can do little sweeps of the primary magenta. You can like some of that to where it just really shows, again, little tiny touches that are in a soft curve. Just barely kind of touch the canvas. And then I do a heavier amount of shadow right here in the center. And if you add a little bit of orange in here, it kind of brings in a little bit of that coral, which is really pretty. A little bit more white. Let's do this little flower here. A little bit of orange, pink, white. Soft curves. Again, we're just doing like little parentheses, parentheses, but in a circular pattern around that flower. Building that texture. When you put in the white, it's like a little highlight. And then when you push in more of that primary magenta, it's like a little shadow. But it's just little sweeps, little gentle sweeps. Now this one's a little bit more coral in nature, so we're going to grab a little bit more of that white and that orange. We're going to do a little soft touch and little half circles, little bits of white. Those accent. You can even do a little bit of that fun yellow in there too, which is really pretty. And there's that little pink right there in the center, and that shadow. And just think little tiny half circles. I'm going to grab some more primary magenta. And I'm going to grab some violet here too. That's also quite lovely. Sometimes to kind of push into. And then let's grab some cadmium red. We haven't used any of that. That's really pretty too. Oops, it's not used yet. And there's some red. All right, so I'm going to start to do little pushes. Let's grab some of that red and kind of just push, push, push the little half circles. A lot of these flowers are just really created more with a little touch. You can grab some of that purple. They play well together, and you can add a little bit of shadow in with that. Go back and forth between red and purple and kind of do a little push. Put more of that shadow in there. And rinse out. And then Grabbing a little bit of the white and the purple. Let me show you what that looks like. That's more of that really pretty lavender, and that becomes a lot more vibrant. So I'll do little touches of that that kind of peek out from the arrangement. And kind of do little tiny touches of that lavender that will kind of just come out. So quick little sweeps of that. And as I work it in, I might even just kind of come up here and do little touches. Kind of vary the angle of the brush stroke to have it going off in different directions. Start to build those layers. You can even do that with a little bit of the blue and the lavender. So you mix those two together. Just kind of push and then pull up. Let the brush kind of make that shape with you. Also have a little bit of a shadow in here with a little bit more of the blue. A darker little flower kind of peeking through. So quick little touches in there. Continue to kind of add a little bit of that balance and kind of work in some of those up here too. Quick little touches. Now build as we go. All right, now we've got some of that. We've got some viridian over here. So I'm going to add a little bit more of that. Very pretty. And I can start to work in just quick little touches of that too. And you can add a little bit of the blue to that too to make it kind of a darker teal. The blue and the viridian kind of makes a darker teal. So I'll kind of push those two together and just kind of push and then lift off with a light hand. So push. So pushing over the shape of that leaf and then lift off with a light hand. So push and then lift off. Now, if you want to be a little bit more precise with a curve, you can come in with your little bit brush, twirl that in, and then kind of work that. I've got a little bit more blue, darken that up a little bit. It's going to feel like you're doing a little parentheses and then add a little parentheses and then lift off with a light hand. Have that follow the curve of the leaf. Do a little bit more blue over here. Make this a little bit more clear. So come in with that curve of that blue, another parentheses, curve of the blue, fill that in and lift off with a light hand. You can see that's a more pronounced leaf shape. So you can do some of those too. So again, kind of push, soft curve, push, soft curve, like little parentheses, and then taper that into a little point. So soft curve to the point, soft curve to a point. And even this is firmer pressure as you curve around and then lift off with a light hand. There's a lot less pressure on the canvas. And you can start to add like little tiny, it's almost like making just a little tiny parenthesis shape. You can add little touches of that, little strands of hair. Can be a fun little turquoise, little firm pressure, push, push, and then long strokes of that can come through your mane. Do a few little touches up here too to continue to add that continuity of like whatever color we kind of push in around here, we can also kind of bring it all the way around in a circle. We're still building those layers. You're going to have a little white, kind of soften that. And grab a little bit of white, kind of soften that in. That softens that blend. Adds a little highlight. Really lightens up that green. More of like a seafoam green. You can just do real quick little touches with the brush too. You can feel that I'm just sort of pushing with a little bit of pressure and then lifting off. And the brush just really kind of makes the mark. All right, I'm going to go back in and make some more vibrant flowers. So I've got a real pretty bright flower up in here. And since I'm teaching and I have to be a little more sensitive to timing and move quickly, I'm just going to be very light-handed so that I don't push in a blend. You can always just stop and let this kind of set up and dry a little bit, and then you don't have to worry about these colors not necessarily playing well together. But sometimes these colors can get a little muddy, so you might let it set up and dry, and then you can come back in and work in your white with your cadmium yellow and just do a little touch over the top. But I'm just going to use a very light hand for my petals and just place that in right over the top. So this is my little buddy brush, and I'm going to kind of rotate it in different angles so that the touch of it just makes a little petal shape. And then there's my little center, and I can come back in here in a second and do a different color. But again, you just want to do a little bit of it's like a push and then a push and then pull, light hand, push and then pull. So it allows a lot of that paint to just really rest right on top of the canvas. Push and pull, push and pull. You can see how it's really textural. Yeah, a little bit of orange to it too. Push and pull. So I have more orange on that one. Kind of darken it up a little bit. Lots of texture that just rests right on top. Okay. And then in the center, then we can add a different color in the middle. I'm gonna rinse out here. And let's go in with some primer magenta for this center. That's going to make a nice contrast. And then let's do a little purple right in there. That's pretty. And then I want to add a little bit more pink over here on this other side. Let's do a light pink. And just do little fun touches. Just kind of barely touching the end of the brush with our little buddy brush. And same thing up here. Kind of add in a few more. Just kind of barely touch on the end of the brush. Just creates a little bit of texture. And then I want a little pink flower up here in the sky. So I'll do a little push, push. I'm going to alternate to different directions so that those petals are coming from all angles. There's that little flower feel. Do that orange too. So those little flowers peeking through. What else is fun with a little white flower in there, little tiny white flowers. So let's grab some more titanium white. Okay. And then we're just going to do a little push. I'm going to alternate directions. So top, side, down, side again. And just that little touch of the side of the brush just makes that perfect little flower. And you can add little tiny pushes with the brush. This looks like little tiny white flowers kind of peeking through there in your little boho bouquet. And sprinkle those around. Add a few more here, little pushes. And you can sweep in little touches more of the white. That's looking quite lovely. Oops, I mean to knock the camera there. My hat. All right, so we need to touch up the eye a little bit. Now, I will say that the permanent marker can definitely be your friend on this. If you're not feeling really confident with these teeny tiny little lines, then letting everything set up and dry and just using the permanent marker to darken that in can absolutely be your friend. So remember, real artists use permanent markers, so not a big deal. I use Poscas all the time and all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate though with the tiny little brush. So we have our little bit brush here, and we're going to do a little push into that Mars black and a little twirl. That gives us a really nice fine point. Let me show you there. Okay. So I'm going to follow this curve around. And you know, when you do, well, if you do makeup in the morning, it's kind of like making a little bit of an eyeliner here. That's going to be how it will feel, but I definitely twirl that first. And again, it feels like you just put a little bit of eyeliner. Not a lot of people actually do eyeliner, maybe. So if you do eyeliner, you're gonna know, oh, I know what that feels like. And then I'm gonna add a teeny amount of blue and white to that too. And we're gonna soften this up a little bit. And again, it's gonna feel like there's that soft curve. That just creates that little bit of a shadow. And then I'm gonna go right back over that with our black. And just kind of blacken that in a little bit. And then you can take more of the pure black and just kind of work this in. Or again, maybe your little permanent marker can definitely be your friend here. And we have just it's not going to be a pure white, but there's a little bit of that white that will peek through. But I'm going to make it just a little bit dirty in there, because it's not a pure white. So I'm going to do just a little bit of white and the brown. I'm going to mix that more. And orange. And just use a really light hand. We're going to work that into that tiny little white space. And then I will come back in with a teeny amount of black and then work in underneath. And darken this back up again and follow that line. That curve around the eye. And then there's one more little accent of that brown. So you got more of that orange. This is a darker brown. Let's do that little twirl. Get a nice fine point. And then we're just going to do a soft little, so it's going to be like a little parentheses right there. Yeah, it's looking good. Okay, kind of looking around here and checking all the details, seeing how we're doing. A little bit of this white and the primary yellow. Finish up this little accent here. And you can always come back in and add more like highlights over the top. So for example, in the mains, you can bring in like a vibrant orange over the top and playful, or that little bit of pink, if you really want to get kind of playful with it. A little bit of that purple too could be really pretty. It's nice shadow, a little bit of a nice texture. And then we left that little white of the eye from the very beginning. I had just traced around it and inked around it with our permanent marker. However, if that ended up getting covered up, little trick here, which is quite nice whenever you're making the little flash points on the eyes as a final touch, you can take the end of your little bit brush and you want to dip that into your white. See, there's that little ball of paint right there on the end. And then with a very light hand, you can use your pinky to kind of help stabilize it there for placement. You can just do a little touch right there over the top. So that's another little thing, a little trick you can do to get that flash point of light right back in there. So, and then I'm going to knock the, kind of soften that a little bit. Okay, a little soft curve there. And then when this sets up and dries a little bit, you can always soften that white to where it doesn't look so unnatural. You can take a little bit of light gray, kind of sweep over the top. We're just kind of softly blending this a little bit. A bit more of that black right over the top. All right, it is looking beautiful. You can come back in. I'm going to add a little bit more of an accent with that brown right here over the top. A little bit here. Again, that's that soft curve. Continue to work in little accents of bright color in your mane. Another color that's really pretty is that Viridian too. So let's go back in with our little bit brush and a little bit more of that Viridian, maybe a little touch of white to subdue it. And having little touches of that. Just barely touch and then lift off with a light hand. So you can kind of pull that through. Add a little bit of water to help it transition and be soft as you place it into the mane. But those are really beautiful accents in the horse as well. All right. Well, that is our beautiful boho horse. So we've done a great job. It's gorgeous. And last step here would be to sign your masterpiece. So I always like to use the permanent marker for that. You can come in here, you can initial, you can sign. You just want to make sure that your paint is all set up and dry, or else it can actually ruin your permanent marker. So just make sure it's all set up and dry, and then this works beautifully over the top. All right, so we are done, but I just want to thank y'all so very much for painting with me today. It's been a pleasure. And again, all the supplies and everything you need is on our website at tipsyartist.com. And yeah, see, let me show you, tipsyartist.com. Yay. So again, that's on our website. Everything you need, just look on online classes and we can get y'all fixed up. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing y'all again very soon. Toodles. Love to y'all.